Hello, this message is being recorded at 7:30 a.m. on Thursday, the 17th of February, 2022. This is an indirect interview between myself and a former student, Asher Chivas. So, let's see. My background in studying history. Well, my qualifications are that I have a Bachelor's of Art in History from Bates College, and I've taken extensive history courses after that, which, if I had wanted to, would have put me much closer to a master's degree. I chose not to pursue that. I've also been a lifelong student of history, and I have tried my best to seek out people who've been there and done that in order to try to gain what's really important for a historian, which is a sense of perspective. Now, perspective is not logic. It's not facts. Those are important. Perspective is like listening to an opera when you don't speak Italian or German. The voice becomes an instrument, and you get a sense of what works and what doesn't work by how things sound, just on the merits of their euphony, their harmony. Without understanding the lyrics, you have to get the story somewhere else. So, what I've tried to do in my life as a student of history and as a teacher of it is to develop a sense of proportion and perspective that will help me get a sense of what is reasonable, what is normal, what is possible in the wide scope of human affairs. My specialty is in the study of Western civilization, from its pre-classical roots in Egypt and Mesopotamia, its first iteration in various Greek civilizations, its example in the Roman Republic and the Roman Empire, the Christian faith, and before it the Jewish faith, and subsequent to it the Islamic faith, studying the birth of our actual Western civilization in the Dark Ages as Christendom, its development throughout the Middle Ages into modern times, where Europe discovers the rest of the world and trades with the rest of the world, colonizes the rest of the world, conquers the rest of the world, and then, thanks to 2 world wars, loses the rest of the world. And the period in global history after that, after World War II, when, as the West loses its grip on the world, the rest of the world in the East and the South awakens, but awakens not as they were before, awakens as a westernized version of whatever they had been before, for better or for worse. For better is you have societies that combine their local traditions with Western notions of human rights. That happens rarely, but it does happen. And on the downside, you've got people who are essentially ancient in their cultural outlook, and that outlook is commensurate with their native technology level, which is pre-industrial, but they have industrial and post-industrial weapons. Dental equipment is used for torture, and you end up with the catalog of crimes in dozens of third world police states. So I have tried to understand human history, Eastern, Chinese, Japanese, Middle Eastern, Indian, Western civilization is my focus, and of course I've studied my own American republics. So, I've been teaching for a quarter of a century, and I've lived for over a half a century, and during all of that time I have observed the world. My political awakening happened during the Carter administration, a time of inflation and weakness and foreign difficulties, which actually echoes the current time and the current administration more than I ever wanted it to. The Iran hostage crisis was the first thing that I deeply studied as a young man growing up. And I'm from New York, grew up in Connecticut, lived most of my adult life in Maine before coming here to Idaho. So, let's see. How many publications have you written about this? I've been studying this China for years. I have friends who are Chinese, one of whom is the wife of my closest friend who came here just before the Tiananmen Square massacre. So Chinese history has been an interest of mine. I do not have publications to cite, except for the ones that I sent to Asher, which are web-based. China Uncensored, in particular, is a source that I respect. Lao Y86, Serpent ZA, and a number of other sources which are based on personal experiences in China, coupled with an intellectual curiosity and a cultural education. What is your goal as an American citizen, as a teacher? To save Western civilization, to do my part anyway, to do my duty, to preserve the West in a recognizably traditional form, Judeo-Christian morals and values, Republican systems of government, or at least systems of government that acknowledge human rights, and fighting what I consider to be the evil of communism, of evils of communism, of postmodernism, of deconstructivism, of the various identity politics of the woke social justice warrior. These people are dragging us back into the savage age of tribalism. They do so in the name of ending racism, but when you have the Seattle School Department having segregated meetings so that people of color can speak without evil whitey around, I'm sorry. That is a return to the Jim Crow South, but with different people in blackface. It is intellectually dishonest and ludicrous on the surface to argue that in the name of racial justice, as they call it, we need to reimpose color-based, ethnic-based, birth characteristic-based systems that prevent people from being defined in a colorblind meritocracy. America at its best, the West at its best, functions as a colorblind meritocracy, where you are judged on the basis of what you say and what you do, not on the basis of how you were born. Let's see. How was I first made aware of the atrocity? I've been studying the greatest mass murderers in world history for a long, long time. The People's Republic of China, particularly the Chinese Communist Party, have that distinction of being the, by far, worst mass murderers in human history. Mao Zedong, in his Great Leap Forward and Cultural Revolution, just to name the two most intense phases of mass murder in Chinese history, murders between 60 and 120 million Chinese in peacetime. He destroys Chinese agriculture. He tries making everyone into a steel producer. Learn about the Great Leap Forward and the Cultural Revolution. Deng Xiaoping and the replacement of to the extent that it ever was genuine communism, with National Socialism seemed better at first. Certainly when we were allied with the Red Chinese against the Soviets in the 80s, it was better for them and for us. But Deng revealed his true colors in the Tiananmen Square massacre. That opened up a lot of people's eyes. That happened the same year as the fall of the Berlin Wall. And it happened because the lovely old men who run the Chinese Communist Party did not want what happened to Gorbachev and the Russians to happen to them. So unlike Gorbachev, who doesn't use the Spetsnaz or the Red Army to suppress movements against communism in Eastern Europe and in the Soviet Union, the Chi Coms do, most bloodily, and everyone knows it. And since then, everyone has had to deal with the reality that while China is trying to, again, it's National Socialism. Hitler would very much understand the economic system that's been set up in the PRC since 1976. You, in China, have a situation where political freedom is denied while economic freedom is encouraged. But the economic freedom, the ability to earn wealth and succeed in business, is absolutely contingent upon your partnering with, in spirit as well as in the letter, the Communist Party of China. So just like the Nazis allowed cartels to make money in Germany as long as they did what the party told them to do, you have a similar situation in China. I've learned since after Tiananmen Square, for example, that the Chinese Communist Party routinely harvests the organs of its political prisoners, sometimes while they're still alive. They take a kidney or a lung and they sell it on the international black market for a profit. Yay, communism. Sometimes they do it after shooting a person in the back of the head and then mailing their family the price of the bullet. But increasingly, they will take single organs from political prisoners, leaving them husks of their former selves. And this is one of the things that's happening in Xinjiang and Tibet and elsewhere. And it's also happening to ethnic Han Chinese who happen to be Falun Gong practitioners or devout Christians who do not take part in the Chinese Communist Christian Church. Damn the Catholic Church for going along with that canard. Yeah, good job, Pope Francis. And anyone else who has an independent opinion. A number of Hong Kongers are going to be going that way and have already gone. But I heard about the particular events with the Uighurs from groups like the YouTube channel China Uncensored, as well as through personal networks. Can you explain the cultural differences between the Han Chinese and the Uyghur Muslims? Yeah, the Uyghur Muslims are Turkic. They are of the Turkic ethnic group. They are not Chinese. Han Chinese develop in the river valleys of the Yangtze and Huanghe valleys in eastern China. And when China is unified under the first sovereign emperor Qin Shi Huangdi, the policy of the kingdom of Qin, which is Qin Shi Huangdi's kingdom, which then encompasses all of what is then China, includes the mass murder of males in the conquered regions and the persistent gang rape of females for months and months and months at a time. I'm not talking constant, but I'm talking repeated, ongoing, so that the new children across a broad level of society will have Qin physical genetic ancestry, Qin blood. This sort of amalgamation of the various Chinese ethnicities into a single Han identity proceeds after that much more peacefully under the Han dynasty. But Han dynasty or Han ethnicity is definitely from an East China source. And there are various differences, ethnic minorities. There are differences between the ethnic Han in the north and the south, for example, and the east and the west. So Han is sort of a generic category, a bit like Caucasian is. And remember, Caucasians include people from Norway all the way to Pakistan and India. So we're talking a very large group. The Uyghurs come from the Central Asian Turkic people, the same people that ultimately originate the Ottoman Turks, the Seljuk Turks before them, and the people who live in Asia Minor now. They moved from Central Asia southwestward towards the Middle East, especially after they became religiously Muslim. So the Uyghurs are a part of that. It's a totally different tradition. Now, from the Tang Dynasty, which is in the early and high Middle Ages, China has had designs on what is northwest China or Xinjiang province. But it isn't until the resolution of the Chinese Civil War in 1949 that China returns to dominate Xinjiang and then conquers the independent kingdom of Tibet. And it is a result of Communist Party policy, especially under the current dictator Xi Jinping, to displace the distinct ethnic group in Xinjiang, which are the Uyghurs, as well as the Tibetans in Tibet, and also to erase their distinct culture. The Uyghurs are Central Asian Muslims, the Tibetans are Buddhists. In both cases, and this is not unique, they do this to other minorities too, the PRC has moved in massive numbers of Han Chinese, has imprisoned local population, either forcibly sterilizing them or raping them, and placing them in brainwashing camps, so that you have videos. You can look on YouTube for happy Uyghurs, and you can see videos of happy Uyghurs in these re-education camps thanking the Chinese government for freeing them from terrorism and superstition. It's a bit like the truly obscene moment where the Chinese Communist Party starts the Olympics by having a Uyghur carry the Olympic torch and light the flame. That was an in-your-face moment to everyone around the world, inside and outside of China, who cares about their genuine human rights records. So the Uyghurs and the Han Chinese are two totally different people. But the Communist Party of China covets as much territory as the Chinese ever actually had, and then some. And since the Manchu dynasty of the 16, 17, and 1800s had control of Xinjiang, the Chi-Coms wanted to. They also lay claim to things like Taiwan, which the Manchus controlled, but the Republic of China never did, because the Japanese took Formosa, Taiwan, from China in 1894, and Taiwan has been an independent country, never a part of Communist China, ever since. And yet the Chinese Communists claim it as part of China from ancient times, just as they make the ridiculous claim of the 9-dash line in the South China Sea, where they claim ownership of everything that isn't literally attached to the coasts of Vietnam or Singapore, or Malaysia, Indonesia, or the Philippines, let alone Taiwan. Let's see. Does the Chinese government have precedence in oppressing minority groups in dissent? I think what you're asking is China unique in what they're doing? No. They're not unique in that they are oppressing minorities. Famously, in Rwanda, there was the genocide by the Hutu against the Tutsi in the 90s, which was remarkably successful and quick. There was the ongoing war in the former Yugoslavia and the Balkans in also the 1990s. These were after effects of the end of the Cold War, where you have the return of genocide under the Orwellian euphemism ethnic cleansing. Every empire in Eurasia at one time or another has preferred some groups over others and had government policy that would foster the development and growth and enrichment of the favored groups at the expense of the unfavored groups. However, in terms of actively pursuing genocide with every technology that the modern world applies, no, the Chinese are unique in that. What they're doing in Xinjiang and Tibet, what they're beginning to do in Hong Kong, and what they want to do in Taiwan is unprecedented in human history. because what you have is George Orwell's 1984's telescreens looking like old analog, silly old codger stuff, because they have networked computers and cameras and microphones everywhere with face recognition technology and AI to recognize voices, monitoring as much as they possibly can. Now, Stalin did this, and so did the communists in the Soviet Union. They monitored everything, but they didn't have the ability to process the information. They just kept people afraid by knowing that we're being listened to. The Chi-Coms, thanks to American tech, thanks to Silicon Valley, actually has AI technology that can help them process the information and do something with it. So what they're doing is unique. It's as unique as the Turks slaughtering the Armenians in the first genocide of the 20th century during World War I. It was not part of World War I, except in the fever dreams of Turkish nationalists. It was an attempt to wipe out an ethnic minority they didn't like. Ask the Kurds about the Turks or the Iranians or the Iraqis, and they have a similar history. They're hated by everyone around them. So ethnic minorities, even Poland in the history of Europe, but what's going on in Xinjiang and elsewhere is far more similar to the Cambodian killing fields of the 1975-1979 period, or if you want to use the term of Pol Pot's Khmer Rouge, Kampuchean killing fields, as well as, of course, Hitler's final solution to the Jewish question and Mao's Cultural Revolution and Great Leap Forward, and Stalin's ongoing mass murder, Ukrainian famine, purges, anti-kulakization, and so forth. Look those up. They're interesting stories of human horror. What parallels exist between the final solution and the current ethnic cleansing of the Xinjiang province? Well, instead of using Russian-style pogroms, which is hot rage, drunken Cossacks slashing at the faces of Jews in the midst of a berserker rage of primal frenzy, which is the way the Russians kept their Jews in line when most of the world's Jews lived between Berlin and Moscow in what was called the Jewish Pale of Settlement. What the Chi-Coms are doing is similar to the final solution in that you have engineers, guys in nice white shirts with pocket protectors and slide rules or calculators, or today, cell phones and the tools of modern technology, organizing assembly lines of brainwashing and death. This isn't hot rage. This isn't a bunch of drunken yahoos, murderous thugs, Cossack bastards. This is seriously taking the intellectual products of universities and of 2 centuries of industrial progress and applying it to the destruction of entire classes of people. What's horrifying about the final solution isn't that Jews were targeted for death. That's been done since Babylonian times, since Egyptian times. What is unusual is you have engineers designing it. You have men who consider themselves decent patriots, law-abiding citizens. By day, they take part in brainwashing and mass murder, and that's their job. And then they go home and play with their dogs and their children on the carpet because they're just following orders, because they've intellectualized it, because they've justified it. Their job is brainwashing. Their job is ethnically cleansing society from all the bad people. It's just a job. That modern curse of applying industrial techniques and modern intellectual demagoguery, sophistry, to hide the truth of what you're actually doing from yourself is, to me, what holds them together. You know what's different? The final solution properly lasts from 1942 until 1944. The attempt to wipe out the Jews lasts properly from 1940-41 to 1945. And the anti-Semitic policies of Hitler were at most of them were about 11 years, and Hitler was in power for 12. Soviet crimes against humanity were 70 years in the making. And they had at least twice the amount of megadeath that Hitler produced. But they were our ally in World War II at the end. The Chinese Communist Party has been in power over the entire country since October of 1949. And their figures are so much larger than everyone else's because they've had so much time, because China is so populous, and because they have so much totalitarian control. So what's not comparable is the Holocaust ended because of British, American, and Russian troops. The Soviet crimes ended because Gorbachev allowed the communist system to fail. The Chinese Communist Party is accelerating its crimes against humanity, and the world rewards it with the 2022 Winter Olympics. Soulless, corrupt, I have no words. The second most corrupt organization in human history is the International Olympic Committee. The most corrupt organization is the United Nations organization. Look at the Iraqi oil for food scandal and you'll see that. Do you think the world was not watching and no word got out? Do you think that... Okay, I'm reading your question 5. Okay. Do you think the Chinese government would have just systematically killed the Uighurs and only re-educated them in an effort to advance dissidents from other countries? Can you give some background? Okay. Tiananmen Square massacre happens in June of 1989. A man I voted for twice, President George Herbert Walker Bush, a man who I once admired deeply, less than 6 months after the Tiananmen Square massacre, sent a secret delegation to Beijing to assure Deng Xiaoping and the Chinese leadership, while their hands were still dripping with the blood of thousands of students. Don't worry. As soon as public opinion fades about Tiananmen Square, we're back in business. Understand that the modern Chinese state exists as it does because of massive Western investment. Without Western money, China would still be a third world hellhole. Now it's a first world hellhole in the coastal cities, a second world hellhole in the industrial zone beyond and inland, and it's still a third world hellhole in much of the countryside. The world knew. The world knows. The problem is that many leaders in the West could care less so long as they make money in China and so long as they can advance a political agenda that seems to offer them peace by bringing China and the West into such an economic codependency that the Chi-Coms would never break with us, which is the kind of wishful thinking that led to the League of Nations, to the United Nations, to the appeasement policies before World War II. It is wishful thinking. It is whistling into the wind. It is nonsense. The Chinese Communist Party continually evinces policies and mindsets that, if they're similar to anything in the West, they're similar to the most aggressive phase of European imperialism in the 1880s, 90s, early 1900s before World War I. So the world knows. The world knows that this Tiananmen Square happened. They knew that the Cultural Revolution and the Great Leap Forward happened. The world knows that organs have been harvested for at least 40 years by the Chinese Communist Party. The world knows all of this stuff. And yet, the NBA still does business in China. Disney has the obscenity to make a live-action Mulan in Xinjiang with the help of Uyghur slave labor. This is nonsense. No, it's beyond nonsense. It is being complicit in an event worse than the Holocaust. And Western businesses and some Western politicians have their hands so deep, they'll never get the stain of this off. What should America or other governments do to stop this? Decouple and reindustrialize. We need to stop doing business with the bloodiest regime in human history. Period. We need to rebuild factories in this country and in countries friendly to us. We need to give up the addictive drug of quick Chinese money, of quick investments. We need to restructure the global economy to make the Chinese Communist Party poor again, to make them the pariahs that they should be for violating human rights at a scale that even Hitler would have admired and never achieved. So, what should we do? We should decouple from the Chinese system. We should stop having our gear manufactured there, and we should rebuild factories either in the United States, which would be nice for Americans who aren't really suited to college, and to if we have to build and do production overseas in the third world because it's just so much cheaper, we should do so in countries that are friendly to us, or at least are not engaged actively in genocide. South Park had a wonderful episode called Banned in China, and if you haven't seen it, you should definitely take the time to see it. And it's only one of South Park's episodes that lampoons and slams the bloodstained butchers of Tiananmen Square. Why do corrupt people in the West do business with China? Because they have sold their souls. Well, that's an old-fashioned answer, but it's true. When you do business with the devil, you got to expect a little sin to come your way. When you lie down with dogs, you get up with fleas. Anyone who does business with the Chinese Communist Party knows who they're getting in bed with, because people aren't stupid. What's good is that one of the few bipartisan issues in the United States is standing up to China in some way, shape, or form. Even Joe Biden seems to want to do what he wants to do in the Ukraine, in part to deter China from invading Taiwan. As much as I disagree with that guy, I at the very least appreciate that he is willing to stand up to China. So, I hope this answers your questions, Asher. I hope you're doing well. You shouldn't have expected a brief answer from me because it's me. Best wishes. Take care. Signing off.